The airport was louder than usual that morning, not because of the crowds, but because of the silence between them. Cameras clicked, fans whispered, managers spoke into earpieces, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Jungkook stood still. His suitcase was already rolling behind him, passport tucked neatly into his jacket pocket, shoulders squared like someone preparing to walk away from something heavy. To everyone watching, it looked like another departure. Another schedule. Another goodbye that came too soon. Rumors had been building for weeks, stacking themselves into a tower of fear that leaned dangerously close to truth. People said Jungkook was exhausted. People said he wanted space. People said he was thinking about leaving the spotlight, maybe even stepping away from everything that made him who he was to the world. Every glance he cast over his shoulder became evidence. Every quiet moment became proof. No one noticed the way his fingers tightened around the strap of his bag. No one noticed the way his eyes searched, not for the exit gate, but for one familiar face in the sea of people. It wasn't the look of someone escaping. It was the look of someone hoping not to be late. The headlines were already written before he took a single step forward. Is Jungkook leaving? They would say. A mysterious solo departure. The story wrote itself because it was easier to believe in endings than in quiet reunions. The world loved drama, and Jungkook's silence fit perfectly into the narrative they wanted. Behind him, the rest of the group lingered, each member wrapped in their own schedule, their own obligations, their own carefully practiced smiles for the cameras. There were hugs that felt rushed, waves that looked final, and the familiar ache of separation that had followed them for years. The difference this time was that Jungkook didn't turn around for one last look. Not at the cameras. Not at the flashing lights. Not at the fans calling his name. Instead, he walked faster. There was a hallway past the security gate that most people never noticed, a narrow corridor meant for staff, deliveries, and moments that weren't meant to be seen. Jungkook slipped into it without looking back. The noise of the airport faded into a distant echo, and for the first time that morning, his breathing slowed. Everyone thought he was leaving. But he wasn't. Down that quiet hallway, someone was already waiting. Taehyung stood near the far wall, hands tucked into the pockets of an oversized coat, eyes hidden behind a fringe of dark hair. He looked calm in the way only someone pretending to be calm could look. His phone was in his hand, screen dark, forgotten. He wasn't scrolling. He wasn't texting. He was counting seconds. When Jungkook turned the corner and saw him, something in his chest loosened. The tension he had been carrying since dawn finally found a place to fall. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other, the way people do when words would only get in the way of what they already understand. To the outside world, they were idols. To the industry, they were schedules and contracts and expectations. But in that hallway, stripped of noise and eyes, they were just two people who had learned how to find each other in chaos. Taehyung tilted his head slightly, the smallest smile forming at the corner of his mouth. "You're late," he said, voice soft but teasing. Jungkook let out a breath that sounded like a laugh. "You always say that," he replied, stepping closer. "But you're always still here." Taehyung's smile didn't widen, but his eyes softened. "Because you always come." The words lingered between them, heavier than they sounded. They carried years of shared rooms, late-night talks, unspoken worries, and promises that were never said out loud because they didn't need to be. Jungkook shifted his bag off his shoulder and set it down, the sound of it hitting the floor echoing in the empty corridor. For weeks, Jungkook had been drowning in the weight of expectations. Every smile felt rehearsed. Every performance felt like it took more out of him than the last. He had started to wonder if leaving, even for a little while, might be the only way to breathe again. The thought scared him, not because of what he would lose, but because of what he might finally admit to himself if he stopped moving. Taehyung had noticed the change before anyone else did. The way Jungkook lingered after rehearsals. The way his laughter came a second too late. The way he stared at nothing during long drives, as if trying to remember a version of himself that existed before the world knew his name. He hadn't pushed. He hadn't asked too many questions. He had just waited. "Everyone thinks you're leaving," Taehyung said quietly. Jungkook nodded. "I know. And you're not going to correct them?" Jungkook glanced down at his suitcase, then back up at Taehyung. "Sometimes it's easier to let people believe what they're ready to understand." Taehyung stepped closer until there was barely any space between them. The hallway felt smaller, not because it had changed, but because the moment had. "Then what are you actually doing?" he asked. Jungkook's voice was steady when he answered, but his eyes weren't. "I'm coming to you." It wasn't a confession in the way stories make confessions dramatic. There was no music swelling, no dramatic pause. It was simple. Honest. Heavy in the way simple truths often are. Taehyung didn't react right away. He just looked at Jungkook, as if making sure he had heard him correctly, as if confirming that this wasn't another thing the world had misunderstood. You could have told me, Taehyung said. I know, Jungkook replied. But I wanted to see if you'd still be here without me promising anything. Taehyung laughed under his breath, a sound caught somewhere between relief and disbelief. You're cruel sometimes. Jungkook smiled faintly. You're still here. Always, Taehyung said, and this time, there was no teasing in it. Outside that hallway, the world kept spinning its story. Fans refreshed their feeds. Reporters speculated. The narrative of departure grew louder with every passing minute. No one saw the way Jungkook leaned his forehead briefly against Taehyung's shoulder, just for a second, just long enough to remember how it felt to be supported without having to perform. No one saw Taehyung reach out and steady Jungkook's hand when it trembled around the handle of his suitcase. No one heard the quiet promise in the way Taehyung said, "You don't have to disappear to rest." Jungkook closed his eyes, letting the words settle. He had spent so long thinking rest meant leaving everything behind. Standing there, in that narrow hallway with Taehyung's presence grounding him, he realized rest could also mean staying. It could mean choosing one person over the noise of everyone else, even if just for a moment. They didn't stay long. They couldn't. Schedules would pull them apart again soon, as they always did. But the difference was that Jungkook wasn't walking away from something. He was walking toward someone, even if only in the space of a few quiet minutes. When they finally stepped back into the noise of the airport, Jungkook lifted his suitcase again. The cameras found him immediately. The whispers started all over. He looked the same as he had before. Calm. Focused. Ready to leave. No one noticed the change in his eyes. Because this time, he wasn't leaving alone.